Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Physio Matters podcast. We've made it all the way to session 73, and we've got our famous team podcast this month, which we are recording. It's early December, so I'm assuming that everybody listening is slightly fatter than they were before on turkey, slightly more hungover, or maybe the hangovers are clear by now after New Year's, but certainly the festivities will be ended. We'll be running riot into a new year, and this is the first podcast of that. We'll be continuing on the airwaves as we normally do for the rest of the year. I have been joined today by Fisty Thou, Jack Chew and Amelia Bell Bentley, and we are going to have a chat about all things Physio Matters. We're going to cover the year just past and into this year as well, and have a little bit of a talk over what the plans are, some statistics and various bits and bobs like that. And Jack's going to introduce all of our team members for us. Take it away, Mr. Chew.
I am over the moon to still be invited to these team podcasts. After the debauchery of last year's, I expected to potentially be kicked off. It's great to be sharing it with the three of you. I see you as three representatives of waves of recruitment over the years. Unfortunately, I mean, despite Felicity having had the pain of knowing me the longest, Jack, you were one of the first to come aboard years ago. Roped Flick in when she came back a couple of years later to the UK from New Zealand, and then Amelia, one of the newest recruit, who got roped in to choose health stuff far more than she ever anticipated when she put an application in to volunteer to Physio Matters. Has been interning and then as a physio assistant at Choose Health HQ this year. So thanks to the three of you for all your hard work as usual, but also for this podcast. So to the listeners, you've got three good ones here, and for a change, I'll try and keep a bit quieter than usual.
Well, I think it is a final straw of getting you on here. You'll see whether you make it next year. Yeah,
last chance. Jack March is the rheumatology lead for Choose Health, as well as then he runs Physio Matters these days, increasingly doing more and more as I do other things, including MSKR with the lady on the screen, at least, to his left, which is Felicity Thou, who is the Deputy Director of Musculoskeletal Reform, MSK Reform, the think tank non-profit that we started this year. I'm sure that will crop up in conversation. Also a physiotherapist in the northeast of England, wearing various different hats for various different people, including her own private practice, FT Physio. Amelia Bell Bentley, a student physiotherapist at Salford University, and physio assistant just left for Choose Health, which we're still grieving over. But thank you, the three of you. I hope that's fair introductions, and I didn't miss any key job titles off. Although Jack and Flick, you both have like 10 different job titles, so
it is hard to keep up. I know
it is. Yeah. What's your role these days, Chew, other than mouthpiece?
Mine, I don't know. I tried to tidy up my Twitter bio the other day, and I was able to condense it to 4, kind of. Choose Health, MD, Director of MSKR, gobshite of Physio Matters, and I'm on the SMT at Design to Move. They're the main ones, but talker of all things MSK. That tends to be the main one, doesn't it?
I think you could have finished that sentence at all things, to be honest.
Many things.
Flick, what's your role mostly for us on Physio Matters? What do you get up to most of the time?
I am a proof listener, I feel. I write the newsletter and put together the Google Drive, which Amelia will be talking a bit about in terms of the newsletter later on. And yes, so that's my role in the podcast. Yes. A little bit of interviewing, a little bit of that.
She interviews on the show, and then every time we ask what else we should do for the podcast, she gets requested to do more interviews. So she's like the star performer that makes us all feel really bad about ourselves.
Just wants the egg come out.
Exactly.
Show about her.
Yeah, that's it.
Interview someone else who's really good, and then I get to take the credit for what's inevitably a good podcast because I have great guests.
Yeah. An underused resource, I feel, the Google Drive. I think we'll obviously pop a link into the into the bio on the podcast notes. So if you're on an app or whatever, you can scroll down, click on it. But we're 73rd episode now, so there must be well over 70 folders of evidence, newsletters, all sorts of golden stuff in there for people to go digging if they've got, I was going to say a bored 5 minutes, but a DNA or a cancel or something in their clinic. Crack on over there.
At least once a week we like blow someone's mind, don't we?
Yeah.
This paper was mentioned in this podcast a year ago. Do you mind sending it over? And instead of getting one, they get every podcast, every paper ever mentioned on a podcast, and they're just like, "Oh my god, what the hell? How did I not know about this?" It's one of my favorite things. I think if it was popularized and everyone knew about it, I think I'd be disappointed in those moments where it's like we get emails saying, thank you so much.
It's a treasure trove, isn't it?
Changed my entire outlook. Well good.
Yeah, it's amazing. You go back and you think, gosh, those folders from 4 years ago and the papers in there are still epic.
Oh, yeah, that's some classics.
Amelia, what have you been doing for us on the podcast? You've been helping me out a bit.
Yes, so I started in May, June-ish time, doing some social media things, helping in the run up to MSK reform, doing some of the publicity for the conference and things like that. I've made quite a few infographics and images and things like that, and then interned at Choose Health over the summer, shadowing on the reception desk and doing some marketing there. I'd say that's the main sort of gist. Doing lots of Twitter, some shout outs on Facebook and things like that.
I'd say another thing that she's probably not going to mention that's really impressive, something we've all tried to do and struggled with, is that compared to anyone else I've ever met, she's tolerated Mark Reed.
Mark's awesome.
Don't say that.
And then still says stuff like that. So I don't know how much he's paid her on the side. I think he's been filtering off some bonuses or something. But yeah,
buy me a
that
sandwich.
He bought you a sandwich. He bought you off that way, did he? Right, but yeah, certainly a credential for your CV, Amelia, and an important role that you've played for all of us.
Yeah, I think that's an easy segue. If anybody else can tolerate Mark Reed, feel free to email us. Because I don't think there'll be many of those emails coming in.
The recruitment strategy now,
yeah. And then I suppose leaves for me to say what I've been doing, which is a lot for the podcast, organising, inviting guests. Well, that editing, choose voice day, week in, week out. That's always fun. Hopefully people have just listened to the Patient Matters that was released in about probably when this goes out, a couple of weeks beforehand, with Pete Moore, and I've had to be finding about 40 minutes of that to butcher out, and to be honest, it's all pretty good, it's all worthwhile. But we were just talking before we came on air about whether we would ever release some of the bits we've chopped out, and some of it's not fit for air, but maybe behind some sort of age barrier, then we'll put that out at some point.
We went off on one, didn't we, me and Pete? And you were having me out for having code switched into a much more regional accent, which is where it makes me realise I put at least a bit of radio voice on clearly some of the time. So no, that's a great episode, and also something that I think we've kind of got used to, that we're now swimming in new waters, aren't we, this year, where we changed the branding up, we got the studio, we changed up to the things like the newsletter and sort of all the branding change, with even the new Choose Health website and stuff. So that's been a big shift for us this year, and also the biggest shift of that really was me being able to hand over the reins pretty much in full to Jack and Flick, and of course then Amelia stepping in as you have. But definitely for me to be able to turn up to work and find out that I've got a podcast. No, well, usually I get a bit more notice than that, but there's a podcast in my diary for Thursday, and there's some time in my diary to do some prep on the Monday, and I'll speak to Jack on that morning, and he can get me up to speed with what I need to know and stuff. It's been a fascinating change of sort of workings with it, but certainly from what we can tell, no drop off in quality, and of course it climbed as we got more organised and more efficient, and that's why I say I'm lucky to be on this show. I've been far less involved than I ever have been.
Yeah, perfect. I think it's worked well. I think it's worked well. Cool. Well, on to I think it's our favourite bit. I don't know whether anybody else. It's hard to do the choosing because there's so many. Flick and I were planning for this call, and we sort of were trying to think what our favourite podcast of the year was, and then you just sort of forget which ones you've done, and you go back through and you think, oh, they were all good. In our opinion, anyway. But so we're going to go around the four of us. We're going to pick our favourite podcast from the year. You get one. I'm going to leave Chew till last because he won't pick one. He'll pick five. And a little bit of a why that was your favourite one, and we'll have a bit of a think as to which was the best pod of the year. So we're going to go. We'll go Amelia first. Which one are you going to go with? What's your favourite pod of the year?
So I've chosen Patient Matters number 2 with Adrian McGregor, Pain and Mental Health, that was done in June. That's out of the ones I listened to, that just seemed to stand out for me. That's the one I remember the most, and it was just so fascinating to hear his journey. And I love learning more about chronic pain and the link between pain and psychology, and you really got to understand his experience, and it was quite emotional. And talking about mental health, and especially strong men talking about mental health, I thought is really inspiring. And from a trainee perspective as a student, learning more about the patient perspective is really helpful for me, and it'll really help me develop in my practice. So yeah, that's what I went with.
Choice.
Yeah, great choice. I was going to ask you about that, but you sort of half answered already. But do you feel like that podcast has mapped onto your university studies? I know you're not miles of the way through, but do you feel like it supported your uni studies, or do you feel like the uni's been a bit more biomedical, left the patient out of it, or what would you say from that point of view?
I think it mapped directly onto what I'm learning at university, especially what I'm learning this year. I'm learning about back pain and things like that. We're doing the biopsychosocial model, and I'm trying to revise what we've learned at the moment. So I hope my lecturers aren't listening and thinking, oh, I really can't remember the exact name of the program that we recommended. But yeah, just generally it does map across. And yeah, taking that more holistic approach to back pain and things like that is something that we're learning at the moment. So having that detailed patient experience to bring it to life sort of fits in quite nicely for me.
Yeah, perfect. Do your fellow students listen?
Some of them do, definitely. I'm going to make them listen to this one. But yeah, they definitely do. I think we tend to listen to it more around exam time. I know I listened to it avidly before I was applying to become a physio. I was like, oh, must learn everything about physio for my interview. And then around exam time last year, I was listening to lots of the things about MSK, tendons and things like that in my first year. That was really useful. And I'd try and go out on a run and listen to it, or put my washing out and listen to it and things like that. Yeah.
Perfect. Good.
Nice to hear. Really cool to be able to recruit from a student pool, isn't it? We never really anticipated that. When we think about the, it's particularly good because initially I had to recruit people like Jack March, Rob Tyre, Rich Barnes onto the team, and so now to be able to get some fresh-faced folk on board's been wonderful, and it's great that students listen, new graduates, and the applications we have for the position that Amelia now holds were just phenomenal. So it's great that we're reaching that audience, definitely.
Yeah, thank you for having me, and thank you for putting the advert out. I appreciate it.
No bother at all. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, those applications were particularly strong, actually. That was really good. Flick, give us your favourite.
Mine this year was, and it was a tough choice, I've gone with what I believe was session 69. It was Elaine Miller's one about pelvic health and incontinence. And obviously Elaine's a comedian. She's super listenable, and I felt it was a very real talk on what can be quite a sensitive topic, and it was a strong message as well to take away. It was, is this common, incontinence and leaking? Is it common? Yes. Is it okay? No. And I've always been a big advocate of women's health physio, and I've always kind of said to people, you don't need to put up with this. Maybe ask your GP for a women's health physio, pelvic health physio referral. But actually, in that podcast, there was loads of practical advice that I can deliver in my little room in Newcastle. So yeah, hugely useful straight away.
Yeah, brilliant.
I think she's I listened back to that more than I usually do the others, in part because I don't think she realizes just how much of a trailblazer she is in application. Like she is in a situation where many of her contemporaries double down on the specialism and the advocacy for there being more specialists in that area, of which she doesn't shy away from, don't get me wrong. But the fact that she is always wanting to recognise the broader workforce and the upskilling of MSK and sports therapists and various different MSK professionals that could step into that space, and just because the goal is to help the health of society, she never puts her blinkers on. No matter how specialised she gets and the importance of the work she does, no matter how many awards she wins, she doesn't let herself put her blinkers on. And I think that's what's so phenomenal about her and so inspirational, is that she takes she recognises the seriousness of the message, but doesn't take herself too seriously. And she's such an example for that, and obviously someone that we all take inspiration from trying to create entertaining messaging. Granted, nowhere near as funny as she is, but just generally trying to create entertainment that makes it palatable, because we recognise that people are listening in their own time. And so, yeah, it was just a fantastic opportunity to chat to her. And certainly we said that we'd try and get her on again next year. I think I have got her on the hook for that, see if we can do some more of the sexual health side of her work, which unfortunately then can't be podcast 69. So she already had podcast 69, which she was pleased to point out on Twitter. But yeah, we'll have to fill that in another time into the 70s or 80s for next year.
She's a brilliant example of getting messaging out in innovative ways as well, which I think is super important in the climates that we are in currently, that the correct messages need to reach many people, and that needs to take many different formats. And I think she is onto a winner. Admittedly, it's not something that is widely applicable, because, as you said, some of us aren't funny, but certainly a way of
that was funny.
I was meaning you. It shows that we can be innovative and we can do these things differently, and I think that's super important.
Yeah.
Cool. On to me then. So I've gone with my favourite pod being Neil O'Connell, which admittedly was Flick's one that she did do the interview for. But the real reason for it is because I think it has the best title that was never given, which was Neil Before the Evidence.
that was the worst.
Did we not actually go with that?
No, I was banned by Felicity
it
Dow.
strongly.
What, you vetoed it, did you, Flick?
Yeah. Neil was mortified that I asked him to do because physio matters, and I just thought he's not going to love Neil Before Evidence. That's terrible.
It was we're just saying I'm not, but that's the funniest thing I've ever come up with, and it was vetoed from ever being on air. But I think being someone who probably is too dogmatically into evidence bases and statistics and various different things, it really sang to all of my biases on appraising papers and realizing the limitations of papers and RCTs, and I certainly learned a lot from it. And I would listen to, if Neil ever wants to do his own podcast where he just talks about that for hours on end, I'll listen to it every time. I think he brings it across in a very palatable, very easy to understand way, and he was the same at the MSKR conference as well, with his talk there. Absolutely brilliant, very, very easy to understand and widely applicable.
Isn't it fascinating though? You mentioned like if he wanted to do his own podcast, like he's a busy man and he's got many different things that he would be doing. But isn't it fascinating that Cochrane or NICE or NIHR and things wouldn't be putting a microphone under people like his nose more regularly? Or David Beard, who we had on last year. You know, these are entertaining people that can transmit an otherwise complex message that's super important, that is difficult to get out there because people perceive it to be dry. So when you get someone like him that can speak so well on that topic, it just seems incredible that's not where some funding transmission, some funding is place to get that message out there when his reach would be amplified by multimedia. So it's such a good point, Jack. I hadn't thought of it until you just said it. I just think it is such a shame when he speaks so well into those topics that's not more readily available, and that obviously that was a podcast about generalities, like whereas having Neil help us to zoom in on those things, and for clinicians, as Flick did so well, to then make sure it was dragged to the clinical applicability, making sure he was appropriately accounting for the time pressures that exist within the application space. Obviously, he has a background as a clinician, but isn't practicing as it stands, and so it was so relevant in every which way. So yeah, again, fascinating. Great choices, the three of you. Pressure's on me.
Yeah, one choice.
Well, so my favourite Patient Matters podcast.
I can cut you off any second.
You're not cutting me off. No, I'll pick one per episode. One per podcast, you said, right?
Yeah, I'm sure
Patient Matters. I think I want to give a nod to Sam Williams, who I hadn't met until he came on the show as a listener of the podcast, who was someone that had persistent pain and had ended up having to do an awful lot of therapist shopping, and then came across our podcasts with people like Greg Lehman and Ben Cormack, from what I recall, and others. That helped him realise that there was another way, and that rehabilitation might be an approach rather than having to shop for modalities. And so for him to come on the podcast and share that as the very first Patient Matters was just an absolutely phenomenal chat, and someone who obviously been in touch with since. He was at the MSKR conference. He's now an MSKR member and going to be involved through that. And I just consider him a great bloke and a friend now, where I just see him as a great ally in that space, for him to have been through that and to share it with us so openly as he did. Similarly, any of the Patient Matters podcasts we've done since are obviously of a similar ilk, but it makes sense, and I wanted to nod to him trailblazing for us in that direction. My favourite Health Matters podcast would be the one that we did with PAL, which is Sarah Tribe and Sandra Harding. In some ways similar to what we were just talking about with Neil O'Connell. It's like these are topics that are sometimes considered to be dry and challenging to have, but the way that they are able to clarify what and to offer practical solutions to complex issues, such as the underlying governance, the framework, the scaffolding that surrounds our practice, the foundations even is probably a better metaphor, is just so important. And so that was a really fascinating episode where I learned a lot in that interview, as well as just exposing you to your own complacency, and then the recognition of that there's so many different places to hide. How do we all step out of those places that we're hiding, but also how can we improve the system so that we don't end up then hiding? It's such a fascinating discussion that's then really informed a lot of MSKR's work since then, since meeting them. And so I thank them for that. My favourite Physio Matters episode is with our colleague and now Yank, Tom Jessen. That was this year, right? Wasn't it?
It was.
But what a story! Someone that like Amelia is now came to us as a student and is then what he would cringe at me calling him a fully fledged expert. But what a brain he has, and also the application of that material for him to admit to the oohs and ahs and the challenges that we face to make clinical decisions based on evidence when it is such a messy area. But he did it so well, and it's quite rightly a very popular episode, I understand, this year. And so I do encourage people to listen to that, where Tom Jessen, who has also conducted some brilliant interviews for Physio Matters this year, was the other side of the table to me in the studio, going into detail on sciatica. So that's my favourite Physio Matters of the year. So that wasn't too painful, was it, Jim?
I don't know. I turned off.
Favorite summer episode, Jack? Favorite podcast of February? Favorite seasonal?
Physio Matters, of course. Yeah.
No one's got a favorite of those. I think those three really. I was going to say about Sam. I think he one came to us off his own back, which was amazing. Two, he came onto the podcast when we that the Patient Matters podcast, when really his was the sort of the trial attempt at recording that type of podcast. It's something we hadn't really done at all. And he admitted to us, hopefully he doesn't mind me saying, but admitted to us before that he was nervous about coming for various reasons, not just he'd not been behind a microphone before. And when you think about the other podcasts that we'd recorded before, many people that we speak to have lectured or given talks or whatever, and they're used to talking to people. And that's not quite Sam's background. And I think, just as you said, a nod to him for just his bravery to come and tell his story on that unknown platform at that time, which was going to somewhere around 20,000 people, is amazing.
Well,
really.
we went live. I've forgotten this.
Yeah,
that's you're right. We went live, didn't we? Straight out the gates, and so yeah, absolutely. Doubly so. You're right to highlight that, Joe.
And again, I'll talk about this in a minute, but we will be continuing in a slightly different fashion the Patient Matters and Health Matters into the new year, so or further into the year. So if any patients are listening and they want to give us a shout and want to come on the pod, then we should be able to accommodate you. So get in touch. We'll have some contact details towards the end. So this part of the podcast is me telling apparently us about TPMP plans for 2020, which are numerous. Some of which at this minute we can't really tell you about. They're still in the pipeline. They are going to be moving forwards, but they are very exciting, but we can't really bring them out until they're finalized in some various different ways. But I think Flick will tell you and Amelia will tell you you're going to want to be signed up to the newsletter, and you're going to want to be a supporter of the show, I think is another thing that we'll be able to say at the minute. If we'll put the links for how to find the newsletter and to support the show as well with a few quid. But we're certainly going to have some new projects that aren't necessarily podcasts on the way, and that will be bringing you lots and lots and lots of stuff. I try not to give the game away.
Lots of
it's
stuff.
hard. There's lots of stuff I don't want to say.
We're going to bring you stuff and things and items.
Yeah, that's exactly correct. I don't know what I can say, what I can't say. But from
it will be loosely CPD related. We're not doing like a clothing line.
Although that has been thrown around.
I did suggest merchandise.
Really?
TPMP t-shirt.
That's news to me.
TPMP branded headphones, so everybody knows what you're listening to. But yeah, from a podcast point of view, we'll obviously be bringing the regular monthly show with the clinical content, which will be again keeping to clinical topics. We've got some great guests lined up, some great ideas for shows, and again, I think this year what we would like is for a little bit more of listener interaction. So let us know who you want to hear from, what topics you want to put out there, and from my point of view, doing the organising, when you make those suggestions, be a little bit more specific to help me along, so I can make the plans. It's quite difficult to organise a podcast on something like objective assessment, for example. So if we could be a little bit more specific on who you want me to speak to. We don't know who we don't know. So if you know people that are super specialists and you want us to speak to them, then put us in touch with them and we'll be happy to get that conversation flowing. And then, like I said, we have a couple more. I think we've got one more Patient Matters left to be released, and I think we've got two more Health Matters left to be released at the time of this podcast coming out. And then the format will change slightly. So the funding that we had through the Kickstarter will have run out by that point. We'll have done our 6 of each, and we will be running them in slightly different format. Do you want to tell them about it, Chu, or do you want me to do that? Because it's going to be
I'm happy to. Yeah, what we've come to realise. So huge thanks, of course. Beginning at the turn of the year, really. What was it, about February, March time, perhaps, that we got the Kickstarter funding to then pilot Patient Matters and Health Matters to try and broaden our remit into other areas and to keep Physio Matters clinical. And that has been a huge success for some of the reasons that we've just talked about, really. It helped us to use the format and the platform, the voice that we created, to try and reach into areas that might have otherwise been a bit niche for our Physio Matters podcast, which only goes out monthly, and to stop it becoming a too congested schedule. Now, we don't therefore want to change that in a rush, but probably we just want to try and play fast and loose with the sort of scheduling of it. And the way that we're going to do that is that we're going to broaden even further to any interesting conversation with any interesting person. And we'll do that under something that we piloted a couple of years ago called Chewing It Over, which is going to be an interview show, of course, as per usual, based on a pun and a play on words, as Choose Health and Physio Matters have always been known for. And so Chewing It Over will be interviews with patients, it'll be interviews with policymakers, it will reach into psychology, it will go into, and this is where I say it might broaden the remit, is it might then wade into other realms, any adjacent topics. We did a special edition of Physio Natters, which might be an example of that for me to give, which is where there was some controversy that came about around the WCPT being held in Dubai. And so we had two gentlemen on, I forget their names, James McCauley and Othman Kasabi. Might get that wrong. Apologies, gents, if I did. But they came on the show on different occasions to talk about their take on that matter. And it was, again, very popular, just using a format and a style of discussion, an open debate that we then applied to areas of practice and beyond. And so we want to be able to do that, and we want to be able to do that on the fly. And so we're going to be releasing those on a Chewing It Over feed, so it doesn't congest it, but anything physio related or MSK related, we will then also put that on as a podcast on the main feed as well. So that's going to be how we go about it. So you will be getting lots of different options available to you. And we certainly won't be producing any less content, but it just won't necessarily be called Patient Matters and Health Matters and be on a monthly basis as you've been having it. So I think I've covered everything there, have I?
I think you have, yeah. Perfect. So I was going to make a point, totally forgot what it was, so I'll cut myself out when I edit. So going back to this year with our podcast, I think we've had a really successful year. The quality of the pods has been absolutely ridiculous. When this goes out and Pete Moore's podcast is out, then we'll clear 300,000 downloads for the year. I think our numbers are slightly down on the year before. We had we changed our hosting site, which, and if anybody's technically minded, they'll know what that is. And unfortunately, we lost some legacy feeds. So if anybody's listening and they're thinking, maybe my colleagues used to listen and they don't anymore, it's possible that their feed is not updating. They think that we're not on. So just give people a gentle nudge in the right direction. Everything will be going up on the Choose Health website. It's easy enough to find, or it's on all the podcast players. And we can get those numbers up a little bit further, back to where they were. No, certainly nothing drastic. We're still just about clearing 30,000 downloads a month, which is pretty impressive from our point of view. So very happy with those numbers, really. And that's just about that, really. Anybody else got anything else they want to sort of just mention about the year gone in the podcast, or you're happy with how it's gone? Anything that we think maybe we could have done better? Flick?
No, I was going to say, was this the first year we were on Spotify?
It was the first year on Spotify, yes. Yeah. Which is how my now new preferred method of listening to our own podcast.
Lovely.
Yep, I listen on Spotify as well.
It was my number one podcast on Spotify. You know, when you get your stats. It was the only one I'd listened to on Spotify, but it was the top one.
It was the top one. Oh, I know what I was going to say. I was going to make a point earlier and I forgot what it was. I think
shoehorn it in.
Shoehorn it in. I can edit myself.
Shoehorning it in.
Shoehorn it in. I think it would be of great help for us if people could, if you're using things like iTunes, just to drop a rating on our podcast. Helps push us upwards. We hardly have any ratings on there for some reason. It only takes 3 seconds. Just click on the 5 stars. That'll do, and then it helps just push us up into other people's feeds so that they know we exist. So do that for us.
We don't shill for that very often, do we?
We don't shill for that enough, just like we don't shill for money enough. Maybe the listeners disagree.
Ratings and reviews. I think that's one of the things that happens when we diversify how people access what we're doing. I think that could well happen. So any of the podcast players, I'm sure a few of them have ratings and reviews, don't they? Like Stitcher Radio and stuff. Still popular. I don't know if Spotify does, but yeah, iTunes is a good example where would help us out. It's an increasingly competitive market, isn't it? And I don't mean necessarily in healthcare podcasts, because obviously we're the best of them. That's easy. I'm meaning more generally podcasts. You know, if people want to tune into stuff, they put on a sports show or us on their commute, and so we need to get on their consciousness. So please do like and share what we're doing.
Indeed, and I'm noticing more and more that the adverts are creeping into the old podcasts as well, and we're managing to stick away from those. So if we want to keep our podcast advert free, then a couple of quid would do that the world of good, if you don't mind. Otherwise you might start hearing that at some point. Lovely. Enough about the podcast. Let's crack on. We're on to Amelia. You would tell us a little bit about our social media and the lovely newsletter.
Yep. So the main thing is we'd quite like it if you got in touch with us on social media, whether it's Facebook, our Instagram, Twitter. Just let us know what you think about the podcast. If you've got any ideas, suggestions for new content, who you'd want to see. I know Jack's covered this a bit already, but yeah, don't be afraid just to send us a DM if you don't want to post it publicly or things like that. Those are things we definitely do listen to and we definitely do pick up on. So that would be amazing. I'm going to say the Twitter handles now and all the handles, so hopefully I get them right. But because we are the Physio Matters podcast, it's at TPM podcast for Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. You can find us on YouTube, the Physio Matters podcast, or you can go through choosehealth.co.uk and you can find the podcast there as well.
Nice.
A few stats for you. We've got 19.1k Twitter followers. Woo!
That's agonizingly close to 20.
I know.
20.
2020 would have been good to tick into 20. So if in fact, if someone knows
There's still
900
time.
people, if you know 900 people, we'll just get them to follow us so that at midnight. Oh, in fact, this is going to go out afterwards, isn't it? So this is a belated call. But the 20th of the first 20, I want 20,000 followers.
If ever there was a reason for us to clip a part of this podcast, let's clip that. Let's get that out early in video form. Us begging for that'd be class. If we can hit 2020 with
20,000 Twitter followers.
Well, no, I want 2020. But 20,200 or 20,020 would do it.
20,020 by 2020.
That'd be class. Yeah, well done, guys. That's fantastic.
And if you want to follow us on Facebook, we've got 8.5k followers, but there you can get all our live streams and things like that, which are really good, which sometimes come out before the podcast. So you should get on our Facebook page, follow us there. And also talking about the conference, got a few stats from that. We had 2,260 tweets reaching 14.7 million people about the conference. So that's cool. Nice big reach for us. Going on to the newsletter. If you want to sign up for the newsletter, get our latest updates, find out more about the pod, you can sign up through the Choose Health website, or there should be a link in the bio. So that's all my social media updates.
Yeah,
cool way to break up some politics scrolling, isn't it, by following us on social media? bit of relief on your Facebook feed for you.
Yeah, that's true. Definitely.
I think that's sort of thing that surely all that'll have died down by the time this is out. Let's pretend. As if.
Yeah, that's true. We're recording a couple of days before we got to go vote, haven't we? So who only knows? But we'll just
days away.
Yeah, we'll just be broadcasting to a sinking ship.
Come on, let's be positive for the new year, you know.
Jim, look, let's get serious. Everyone's surely downloading this podcast on their free broadband. That's surely what's happened now.
That bit is getting cut.
One of the things with the social media stuff, I think with Facebook, people, and I'm like this as well, is that I use Twitter professionally and Facebook personally.
Yeah.
However, just even if you're going to lurk or even like it and then unfollow it, then following Physio Matters on Facebook is exactly the sort of way that you get these messages to your colleagues that might otherwise not listen. You might be friends with them on Facebook, and they might otherwise be disinterested, consider it to be a bit too intense to be involved in CPD outside of work time. All totally valid opinions, but they might frustrate you in a sense that you feel that there's certain people that might get left behind on it. Whereas if you were to like and just follow Physio Matters on Facebook, then that's the sort of thing that then transmits that. You think about the people that you studied with. Think about how many interprofessionally, how many people that you have on your friends list on Facebook. Even if you're not going to engage with that material, which of course would be our preference, then that would be something well worth you doing, and we'd really appreciate that.
Yeah, for sure. But it always surprises me that Facebook lags a bit behind Twitter, and I'm not sure why that is, considering all the media goes on there, whereas none of the media goes on Twitter.
I think it's purely a sense of timing. I think it will catch it up. It's just that we weren't on Facebook, were we, for 2.5 years or something like that?
There's a lot of good debate on Twitter as well, and it's easier to share. I think you have quite good debate or banter.
Why was banter in air
I just felt so cringe saying the word banter that I had to caveat it with some quotation marks that people won't be able to see on a podcast. But...
That's amazing. I so thought that it was just a slight on our banter. It's like so-called banter. That's what you were doing with the air quote.
Oh dear. Anyway, let's get off social media and banter. Flick, we couldn't have a podcast where we've discussed 2019 without discussing MSKR, and the same thing about 2020. So fill us all in on all things MSKR. What's happening?
Indeed. So MSK Reform, or MSKR, is, as Jack mentioned earlier, our grassroots think tank. And I'll go back in time, back into 2019, when it all started, in case you've somehow missed all of this. But essentially, we noticed there was a lot of people talking to us about how people who had their head in their hands at the variation in practice in MSK practice, people who were thinking, hang about, what does being chartered actually mean as a physio? Why isn't it as many hoops to jump through as other professions? Or people who were frustrated at an inaccurate article in the mainstream media about healthcare. And essentially we took these people and put them in groups and said, please help us put together a manifesto on what we could do to improve that. And they were led by 5 brilliant people who I have to name because they're brilliant. Emma Salt, Paula Deacon, Reena Patel, Matt Wyatt and Ash James. They led the 5 different working groups, and we put together their 5 chapters as part of our manifesto, which we then presented at our conference back in October. And that then preceded the MSKR movement, which you can now find out much more about and join at www.mskreform.org.uk. And look, it's £50 to join for the year, which is what I paid, it's what Stu paid, it's what we all pay. And the reason for that is there will be resources that we need to pay for. There's hopefully in the future will be road shows. We have membership packs that you get when you join that are sent out. And currently what we're doing with MSK Reform is we're talking to, at the minute, partner organisations. We're in the full throw of a policy vote. So for each of the 5 chapters, we've got multiple different policies, and we want to whittle them down to our 2020 priorities. So at the minute, the governance vote is open. Each 2 weeks, it's a different chapter. And in the new year, we'll have the policies ready. We've got the action group leads, our working group leads. They're all signed up again and ready to go. We're going to be doing applications to be part of the action group. So all of that to say, there is really no better time to be getting involved with MSKR. This is the time to be signing up. This is the time where you've got your most clout to vote for your priorities. This is the time where you've got the best choice of what really appeals to you for an action group. This is the time to make a difference, really. So yes, that website again is mskreform.org.uk, and hopefully we'll see you there.
I'm super hoping that there's a campaign coming called 2020 Vision for MSKR, and if there isn't, then you can have that for free. Like
Say that
Neil
again,
before
Jack.
the
Sorry, I
evidence.
just got to write that down. What was it?
Neil before the
That
evidence.
is
Gosh.
really good. That is really good.
A 2020 Vision for MSKR.
Good.
Oh God, let's get on that quickly. Like, that is
Don't let Specsavers anywhere near that.
Write that down.
Fair play, Jimbo. That was very good. Yeah, I think that again, wonderfully succinctly put from Flick. So let me waffle about the same thing.
Now for 20 minutes.
For
Yes.
20 minutes, yeah.
You've got 1 minute.
Okay, 1 minute. What do I want to say about MSKR in 1 minute that I haven't said over and over again this year? We were accused and still get accused sometimes of being all talk, and it's a podcast, and so forgive us for that. Sometimes we analyse, we discuss, we sometimes might critique, but fundamentally we've always then been presenting things. Every episode has its yes, but what would you do about it points to it, whereas this is our what would you do about it answer to the broader question of what we feel is poor practice and how you would champion quality over the complacency that can exist in any profession, in any sector. But of course, we notice it in our own and we want to do something about it. And so this is what we're doing. And so, as Flick said, mskreform.org.uk/join. Of course, all the resources, don't just take our word for it. We've produced, so much free stuff for you to download there. Executive summary of the manifesto, the 20-pager with graphics if you wanted to skim through to see if it whet your appetite. And then a really palatable way of getting through the manifesto through chapter by chapter. We've had some great feedback about how readable it is. And so you've got lots there, including the website, then talks you through the story, what its intentions are, what you would be funding by joining it, how you can make a difference by persuading other member organisations that you're part of, or the organisations that you work with or for, or the unis that you went to or currently go to, how they can be involved. There's so many different ways that we can involve you now, and to really instigate the change and make sure we don't have any regrets, because there are lots of things happening politically and otherwise that could help MSK to become at the forefront of or in the background, and we really need to make sure that we all sleep easy knowing that we've done the best we can, and I think that the time is now for that.
Well done. That was pretty quick, Chew. I'm
Thanks,
impressed.
mate.
That's all right. I'm going to give you that one. Well done. Brill. So that brings us to the end of our particular podcast-related content. So we just wanted to have a little bit of a discussion on Mike and see what our thoughts were heading into 2020 as we face more and more challenges with regards to MSK practice. So I wanted to ask you guys your thoughts, and we can just have a bit of a muse on this each. About what we think the biggest barriers are facing UK MSK practice at the minute, and if you have any solutions to them, what you think we might want to be able to do about that. So what do you, from a student perspective, Amelia, what do you think about that?
Well, I haven't gone with a specifically student perspective, but when I'm going into different placements and seeing different things, and especially with even having lecturers with different outlooks and different perspectives on what the best treatment is, I'm realising more and more that as I go out into practice, there's going to be a mismatch between the different practices, with each physios having slightly different treatments, slightly different beliefs in what is going to be effective. And I'm concerned from a patient perspective how that's going to affect the patient. One patient might be going to one physio that treats patients a certain way, and then another patient might be going to another physio that treats them slightly differently. So it's how does that affect the patient experience, the different beliefs and different training of physios? How does that affect patients, and how can we have a certain standard, or how do we know we're meeting a certain standard of patient care because of those differences, especially when you're talking across different areas and things like that. With all the different factors you've got to factor in, like, is it private? Are they going to hospital? How much funding has that area gotten? All these different factors. How can we make sure that MSK practice meets certain standards across the board? So that's what I went with.
Yeah, bombshell answer. I suppose MSKR is a good place to plug that again, isn't it? With the trying to reduce unwarranted variation in practice, and I don't think anybody would be suggesting that we should be treating to a recipe, that there should be no variation in practice, but certainly we should be narrowing the scope to more effective and more cost-effective treatments as is possible, I think.
Yeah, because obviously every patient is different, so you've got to marry your care to the patient that's in front of you. But I think it's difficult as a student learning about all these different things, like which one should I use, when should I use them, how do I know what to use, and things like that. And like there's a certain evidence for this one practice and there's this much evidence for this practice, but how do I know which one I should use when I'm getting into practice? So yeah.
Yeah, for sure. It's a great one.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Follow that, Felicity Thou.
I know, right? Well, my thought was the biggest issue in UK MSK practice is our mammoth and I don't mean our as in physios, I mean our as in society's massive misunderstanding of pain, and why it's there, what causes it. I long for the day, I've said this for ages, please, David Attenborough, please will you do a documentary into the public's living rooms about pain. It doesn't have to be David Attenborough, but it does have to be.
It does now you said it.
Yeah, I would totally, people I tell people this all the time because I'm quite sad, but people are often like, he's an animal person. Anyway, irrelevant. David Attenborough has brought plastic into our living rooms and we've all said, oh my God, I get it. I'm waiting for that documentary, that public-facing documentary, where we all go, oh, yeah, we get it. Yes, because of course, I think it affects our patients' expectations. It affects our and our colleagues' choice of treatments, and I think sometimes a poor understanding of pain can lead you down a difficult path in terms of patient treatment choices and dependency of that patient on said choices. I'm talking about the biomedical model there. So yes, I think that if on the whole we as a planet had a better understanding of pain relief and why it's there, and a greater appreciation of the fact that it's a person experience, it's a person event rather than a body or a foot or a back event, then I think my job would it be easier? I'm not sure, but it would certainly make aspects of my job easier, and I would hazard a guess, I'll leave it to David Attenborough, but I'd hazard a guess that we could actually reduce the upward trend that is increasing pain at the minute in the world.
I think we should use that as a pitch to the BBC, and you can write for
if
David
anyone
Attenborough.
knows David, then Mr. Attenborough, please, we need you.
Yeah,
what he's done for plastic in the oceans. This would be
imagine David Attenborough chewing it over.
Yeah, he hasn't got back to me on WhatsApp. He's all over Snapchat now. So he's just leaving me behind on the tech. That's why I can't get hold of Big Dave. So we're dare to dream. That's one for 2020, isn't it? Let's hope we can get him on the show. No, it's a great idea. I think it's a great example. We need to get better messaging in the media, and that would be one way of sort of really shaking things up. And I think if you had to pick an issue, it would be that, wouldn't it? If people had a better comprehension of the that even just the basic instinct that pain is more complex than a sense of tissue damage, or that would, when that penny's dropped, a lot of things then can move from that, can't it?
I would like also to put it in the, I think, wouldn't that be cool in a GCSE curriculum? Would it be more useful than learning about chlorophyll? Just thoughts. Thoughts.
Yeah.
Flick wants to indoctrinate the children.
Why not? Go on then, Chu. What biggest barrier for you, MSK practice?
I think because of the work of you three and others in our team that aren't here on the show today. I've been displaced into trying to play the diplomat and to work with various different people cross-party and try and create this broad coalition through MSK reform. And so I'm going to give an answer from what I've learned in that space, particularly over the last 12 months, but it's also been an increasing part of my role over the years, really, as we tried to take some responsibility for the platform that we'd accidentally created, in a sense. And that is that I think that cowardice masquerading as diplomacy is one of the biggest issues that we face in MSK. There's people that have got private opinions that they can't even find a way to share publicly, or there's disagreements that they have interprofessionally that they won't attempt conversation in a direction of, or if they do, it's behind closed doors under particular circumstances that then are always protected from the masses. On very important issues, that these are respected people that have got great ideas that should just be able to share them, but for whatever reason they're deciding to bottle that up, or they perceive that the masses are too daft to understand it properly, and so then these conversations end up being behind closed doors for too long, and that often these things are what influence policy decisions, and then people get frustrated that they're not then followed by the masses. And it's such an interesting phenomenon for me to have been able to literally witness, is that it's at the heart of it. And whilst I understand how it comes about, I do think that people sometimes make the mistake of thinking it's diplomatic, when actually at the heart of it, it's just that you're bottling it. You don't want to face any fallout. You'd sooner not what that basic interprofessional conflict, which wouldn't actually be that rowdy, if you dip your toe in the water, the water's not as cold as you think. I think if they just got stuck in, they wouldn't do it so much. But actually, there is an awful lot that goes on where people are just not speaking their mind, not allowing for discussion and debate to happen. And so here we are. What are we now? This is our 6-year anniversary, is it, in December? And so here we are being still. There's plenty of podcasts out there, but as far as discussion, debate, style formats that we now take to events and stuff like that, it's still not. We're still seen as trailblazers in that space, which is just embarrassing 6 years on, and are still considered confrontational by some to a negative end. And the way in which I think if we were just to step into a little bit more bravery, a little bit more conversation, trusting an audience to be able to see through it, and to rely on the fact that broad coalitions and conversations amongst those people can be the thing that can drive policy. And of course, that needs to include everyone. It needs to include patients and carers and students and therapists, but also non-clinician researchers and all sorts of different people. We need the best minds on this, no matter what their background. And so we need to broaden our understanding of that and to broaden that coalition. And I do think that we need to just have a look at ourselves when we think we're being diplomatic or being safe. We need to recognise when that is diplomacy and when it might also be cowardice.
Wow. I totally agree. I think that's fascinating. And I think you've been afforded a really interesting insight this year, which I hope will be for the benefit of all of us.
What about yours then, mate?
Well,
you're not allowed to agree with those two.
Mine was rather similar to Felicity's, actually, although slightly different tack, more into sort of general health. But I think that the biggest barrier that we're facing is people just becoming more unwell in general, and being able to, modern medicine is able to continue to, for want of a better term, fix the ills that befall people. And as a result, we're living longer, so that our population is aging, and with that, all those things, with more obesity, more age, become more MSK problems. And I feel like we are spending a lot of time, a lot of resources on essentially firefighting, where we are not able to spend as much resources in, as Felicity said, into the early upstream portions of care where we get people a lot earlier before these problems become chronic or become big problems. And I think we need better health education in general at younger ages, so that people are eating better, exercising more younger, so that we don't get these follow-up healthcare conditions later. We obviously will not know what the generation of children now, their health problems will be in 20, 30, 40 years time, but physios and doctors and all of us will be having to deal with those. We're obviously less active, obviously heavier, and diets aren't so good, so hopefully we can swing that back round the other way and have a general improvement in health. But I think that needs to happen sooner rather than later, unfortunately.
MSK is often upstream of various different cardiovascular diseases, diabetes, and of course cancer. Increasingly, there's evidence to show that activity levels can really precede low activity levels can precede many cancers. So, really good point, Jack. And I think it's also where it speaks to the unwarranted variation point, where there's an opportunity cost if you're not giving proper health messages that Amelia mentioned. There's the fact that if pain is better understood, then people don't think themselves doing damage to their bodies when they then exercise or live a functionally active life. And then also to what I was saying is that sometimes there's some home truths that need to occur, especially on a policy level, to make sure we're not tiptoeing around things when the evidence is strongly in favour, which speaks to my cowardice point. So thanks for drawing it all together for us, Jack, is that we should all be striving for better health outcomes, as a society. What more is there in it when we're talking about all that we're talking about? Is that we've got to keep that bigger picture in mind and try and have a healthier society for us all. So no, it's a great point.
Yeah, I agree. I made a great point. It'll be the final great point of the evening. So I want to thank the three of you for being on the podcast with me. We should thank the rest of the team as well. We've got Shah, we've got Rob, we've got Barnesy, Rich Barnes. Who else am I missing? George, Tom, Matt Murray Downing as well. All the
Probs Reedy.
Who?
Oh,
Did you mention Rob?
Yeah, I did mention Rob, yeah. And yeah, sometimes Mark Reed as well. He's given me a little bit of help with the website once or twice. So I thank all those guys as well, the support they give us, especially when we're out on road shows, doing some interviewing, doing all the support that they do us when we need some help from them. So
was
thanks.
Was Matt Murray Downing meant to be on this podcast and he's just late? Or is he not on this show?
I think that's a niche joke that no one else gets apart from Matt Murray Downing, the rest of the team. The obviously, thanks to all the listeners who tune in, make this worthwhile for us doing. We'd probably still have these conversations, but if a few thousand people didn't tune in, we probably wouldn't bother recording them anymore. And those people that have ever thrown us a few quid to keep the show going and above water we can't thank them enough, really.
Absolutely, yeah. choosehealth.co.uk/support if you'd like to give a small amount on a regular basis or a one-off donation of any flavour, then please do let us know. If you do go to that and let us know who you are so we can send our thanks, of course, and join MSKR. That's the most important shield, though, isn't it? That would support all of us to actually transmit it into real action.
Yes, definitely. Head over there right now. What was the website, Felicity?
skreform.org.uk/join.
Lovely. We'll get a spike of visitors as soon as this podcast goes out.
Let's hope so.
Well, that's brilliant. So all we've got left to do is the cheesy sign out, which usually takes us about 4 or 5 attempts. So all of you will be hearing the edited version that I've managed to come up with after we've tried about 5 times to get it right. But we'll see you on the next podcast.
You've been listening
to the Physio Matters podcast,
discussing physio matters.
Because physio
matters.
Woo! Yippee!
Happy New Year!